start our normal opening and welcome with the opening prayer. We give thanks for the contribution by our pioneers, early settlers and those who fought in the various wars for the fabric of the Tenterfield community we have today. May the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord. Acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land that we are meeting on today. I would also like to pay respect to the elders, both past and present, of the Yuckabull, Kamilaroi and Bundjalung nations, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people present. Apologies, we have three. The obvious one is the Mayor. He is in transit at the moment and will hopefully join us at some stage during the meeting. He attended Thomas George's valedictory dinner at Parliament House last night. We also have apologies from Michael Petrie and Don Forbes. And of course, Andre Compler is on leave for this week. Number 4 on the agenda, disclosures and declarations of interest. Any of those? Confirmation of the previous minutes. Can I move in a second? We were all at it. Thomas Peters. Brian Murray. All in favour? Carried. Tabling of documents. We have any tabling of documents? This is a confidential document. It's the Office of Casual Hire of Plant to go with that confidential item later in the agenda. Urgent, late and supplementary items of business. Anybody got any of those for submission? No. We then move to community consultation and public access. And Mr. John Landers, better known as Dodge from the Westpac Helicopter, is our first guest. Councillors, can we all rise and welcome John to the microphone?
Straight ahead to the right.
Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. As Greg just introduced me, I'm the president of Westpac Support Group for Tenterfield, and it's my pleasure to present the council with a little plaque for their donation of $2,000. The helicopter last month did 26 flights out of Lismore, which is the least number of flights for any month for the last 6 months. So it's doing over mostly one trip a day or more than one trip a day. Our biggest thing is our cost of fuel, so every dollar we earn sort of keeps that chopper in the air, which is the most important thing Tenterfield has. Who would I like to present this to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks very much, mate.
Well,
Take the lens cover off.
there's always a back.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors.
Thanks very much, John. Next, we have 2 members of our operational side of things. We have Jenny Stoker, our senior librarian, to address us. Can we all rise, please, and welcome Jenny. Thank you, councillors.
Yes, you do. Press the button or what? Turn it up. Good morning, Council. First, I would like to thank you for your support of our Renew Our Libraries campaign. It's been happening for a little while now, and it will continue up till at least the state elections in March next year. We do need ongoing support to secure the future sustainability of library funding with the aim of doubling the funding. The 60 million that state government offered is not up to the 94 million that the Public Libraries Association of New South Wales recommended, and also want the funding indexed, as in linking it to the CPI, and we want to protect the funding by amending the legislation to lock in the total library funding arrangements for the future. Okay, I just wanted to give you some more information on some aspects of the operational plan for the library. We provide a wide range of facilities and activities to support the physical and mental health of the community. We cover as many community needs and activities as we can within the budget, but are always open to suggestions for change and improvement. We provide and promote a home library service to people in the town area who are unable to visit the library. This is a regular weekly service. Items are selected according to a template supplied by our clients, then processed ready for delivery each Friday morning. We provide and promote resources available for people with limited vision and hearing, such as talking books and large print books. The library staff mostly utilise shared NTCLS, which is Northern Tablelands Cooperative Library Service resources, which are regularly exchanged with the members, including Armidale, Byra, Glennis and Imperial libraries. Every 12 months I have a look at the library services policy to see if it needs any changes to be made, and as regards to ongoing collection management, including acquisition and disposal of resources. As we are regularly acquiring new resources, we also need to regularly dispose of items that are damaged or no longer used. We provide library branch services in villages, and we communicate regularly with the staff who are at those branches, and we have a monthly exchange visit so we can monitor the needs of the local communities at Drake, Irvingville and Torrington. We provide spaces and opportunities for individuals and small community groups to meet and access technology. We currently have family history group, book club and knitting groups meeting regularly at the library. We provide a space for exhibitions and displays of public interest. Occasionally we have displays from State Library, but mostly we use our own resources to complement a locally occurring theme, such as Book Week and the Peter Allen Festival. We provide public access to online training and resources. This is an important service to the community, especially for the socially and economically disadvantaged, as it can provide the only means some community members have to access online training and general information. We provide a free basic research and reference service. This is a basic public library service. Staff can assist community members obtaining basic information using the resources of the State Library, the New South Wales Public Library Network and the Internet. We are also starting a new project to manage all corporate art, artefacts, honour boards and memorabilia. We intend to locate and identify all significant artworks and objects and then compile a database of the items. We have had to consider copyright issues, as moving artworks from one form to another, for example from the physical to the digital, or like taking a photo of a painting and placing that photo on a digital database, requires the permission of the creator of the artwork. After investigation and consultation, we have decided to use a written description and add photos of the artworks when or if formal permission is gained. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Jenny. Any questions? No questions?
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you very much, Jenny, and feel free to stay and for morning tea when the time for that comes.
Thank you.
Okay. And our councillors, everybody gets a chance when the CEO finishes to ask them questions. Welcome, Terry Dodd. Still have microphone? We should have, yes.
Thanks, everybody. I'm not going to speak about the whole operation report. I'm going to speak about what I've been passionately working on since the 16th of April, waste to energy. The Mayor, Deputy Mayor and myself flew back from Albury last night after attending the Local Government New South Wales annual conference. One of the motions, which was by the board, related to waste management. Covered every topic of waste management except waste to energy. The Mayor and myself confronted the representative from the New England area and asked for amendments to be made to the motion. Put those amendments up to all the delegates on Monday afternoon, and the amended motion, which included investigating waste to energy, was approved without a single person objecting to it or without a single comment in the negative. That's a long way from where it's come from. Last week, I wrote a letter to the Australian Renewable Energy Agency and included in that letter a copy of a 14-page project brief, which in effect is a grant application. The Australian Renewable Energy Agency didn't have a grant application pro forma suitable for Tenterfield to use, because what we're doing has never been done before, and what we're doing doesn't fit in any of their existing boxes, not in New South Wales at least. So the Australian Renewable Energy Agency allowed us to put a project brief in, which also forms part of the application. I then heard through the grapevine that they'll assess it within a couple of months. So I wrote back to them saying that was not what we wanted, unacceptable, and I said I wanted it assessed before next Thursday afternoon at 1 o'clock, because next Thursday afternoon at 1 o'clock, Tenterfield Shire Council, through the New South Wales Country Mayors Association, has arranged a meeting with the head of the Department of Premier and Cabinet, the head of the Environmental Protection Authority, the head of the Office of Environment and Heritage, the Regional Infrastructure Coordinator Group, Mr. Ken Gillespie, Don Murray, Harry Henderson, a couple of other people from the DPC, as well as a gentleman called Mr. John King from Tallis Consulting in Perth. John, myself and Peter Petty met at the beginning of September when Peter and I flew over to Perth. I've met at least 8 CEOs of different waste to energy companies in the last 6 months, all of which push their own barrow. Mr. King's the only independent consultant I met in the country who doesn't really care which company wins or who does what. He only cares that his consultant's advice is a true and accurate reflection of what a client wants. So I contacted Mr. Ken Gillespie, said that I was unhappy with the agenda on the 1st of November, as it would be hardly likely for the EPA and OEH to admit policy failings with their own policy, and I strongly suggested that they invite Mr. John King from Western Australia, as when I was in Western Australia, John and a couple of other people informed us that they didn't spend a lot of time looking to consult in New South Wales, because the whole industry rate New South Wales off as a basket case to get waste to energy approved. He's had a partner working on other waste issues in Berry for 5 years and couldn't even get a meeting with the government in relation to it. So Mr. King will be attending the meeting as well. Getting back to the ARENA application, I told them that the assessment was unsatisfactory, that it was going to take so long. Subsequently, ARENA have arranged a meeting with myself and Regional Development Australia in Northern England next Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. To discuss the application such that we'll know about our success, or otherwise 24 hours before the meeting in Sydney on the next day, on the Thursday. So it's a Zoom meeting, which is just as well, because there's been a fair bit of moving and travel with this. So by 4 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, myself, David Thompson, who's an economic modeller for Regional Development Northern Inland, and Nathan Axelson, who's the Executive Officer for Regional Development Northern Inland, and Arena would have met. We've asked Arena for $420,000. My gut feeling is we'll need about $540,000 to do the study properly. We actually, technically speaking, we actually don't need any money for the study. We already know that waste to energy works, and we already know it's been done around the world. We need the money to hire independent professionals to review the advice, such that when we get a blockage, which is almost inevitable, when we get a blockage through either the EPA, OEH or somebody else within government, that we've got independent advice, preferably from someone with a PhD qualification in electrical, chemical and mechanical engineering. And there's quite a few people around, believe it or not, with those sort of qualifications, linked to a university where their reputation's worth more than a dollar, such that I can combat what I know is, or what appears to have happened in the last 7 years. I won't mention names, but there's 2 councils, which I'm very well aware of, that have been trying to do waste to energy for 7 years, and they're getting blocked every step of the way. Not what I found out from the high levels of EPA, but middle management of EPA. Mr. Gillespie quite happily informed me about 3 weeks ago that he's seen no pushback from the head of the EPA, the head of the OEH, and I've given him confidential documents from the 2 councils involved, proving to him that there's been pushback at the middle management level. New South Wales has got a policy on waste to energy, yet it's the only state that isn't progressing waste to energy. So hopefully by late on Thursday afternoon on the 1st of November, we'll have an objective. What I'm aiming for off the DPC's office is through the Regional Infrastructure Coordinator, Council will be given a project champion. I'm aiming for 1 or 2 people, Mr. Nick White, who's a special project manager reporting directly to Mr. Ken Gillespie, or Mr. Harry Henderson. Unless I've got access directly to the DPC and directly to the Premier, I don't think this project's going to get off the ground, from what I've heard from other councils. There's a lot of misinformation out there about waste to energy as well. The War on Waste presenter, Craig Rewcastle, attended the conference and spoke on Tuesday afternoon and was very anti-waste to energy. He's been to Europe and seen the waste to energy plants over there, and his comment was they're only 1 step better than burying in the ground. Which is true. They are 1 step better than burying in the ground, but they are better than burying in the ground. What the proponents are saying is that waste to energy plants around the world are sneaking into the recycling arena and taking goods that could be recycled and turning them into energy. I refute that. After having spoken to about 10 waste to energy experts in the country, the reason that soft plastics are going into waste to energy plants versus being recycled is that there's no market for them. There's market for high level clear plastics. There's market for opaque plastics, hard opaque plastics such as milk bottles. There's no market for plastic bags and soft plastics. They're piling up all around the world, and Sweden, which is probably the best example, despite the fact that they've got laws saying what shall and shan't happen, they're flat out recycling half of it. They're down to about 36%. because it actually costs them money to recycle. It actually costs more money than the product's actually worth at the end, and more money to process it than what the end product's worth. I'm going to hire what they call an environmental economist, and that environmental economist will look at the net carbon offsets between burning a tonne of coal at Liddell or Mount Piper or somewhere, the 11% energy loss to pump it up to here, the sulphur and the CO2 made at Mount Piper or Liddell versus releasing the energy that's entrapped in waste on site, not having a friction loss through the transmission lines, and not having transportation, which is happening at the moment. To move 30 tonne of waste from St Mary's to Ipswich is transferring the cost and the social risk for traffic accidents and the physical cost to the RMS, not from the councils in Sydney that are conveniently putting 60,000 loads a year and sending it to Ipswich. Sorry, 30,000 loads with both directions. The trucks are going back empty. So by hiring an environmental economist, people that say that it's only one step better than putting in the ground, I'll be able to say that it reduces methane, which is now apparently, according to Mr Rewcastle, between 31 and 33 times worse than carbon dioxide. So one cubic metre of methane, and I forget what the ratios were, but it was tiny, is equivalent to 30 cubic metres of carbon dioxide. Or 33 it might have been. Greg might be able to remember what the figure was. So by hiring an environmental economist, I get to look at the net offsets, the amount of money that councils are spending carting waste long distances, then putting in the waste cell that's worth millions of dollars, then capturing the methane, and by the way, we only capture about a quarter of it. We're very poor at capturing methane because it actually can leak methane for 50 years. We're not very good at that. We're not very good at managing the leachate. Even the modern cells that have got good liners, there's no guarantee that the liner hasn't been pierced, and you don't know until it's full. By the way, for those of you who don't know what leachate is it's an acid that deoxygenizes all water and kills all fish life and anything that's in the water, in fact. And it's caused by rainwater landing on top of the waste cell and soaking down through the waste, and it causes a chemical reaction with the producible waste that's buried, which then forms an acid. And the reason it takes so long to come out of the waste is it just depends on how long the water goes through and how fast the producible waste that's in the waste cell decomposes. It's a horrid substance. And up until about 15 years ago, every waste cell in the country didn't have a liner, and that substance was going into creeks and waterways, and still is in the very, very old waste cells that are over 15 or 25 years old, whenever they came in. So by next Thursday afternoon, I'm hoping to have a project champion from the DPC. I'm hoping, depending on how our application goes for the $420,000 from ARENA, to have a surety from the DPC that they will partner Tenterfield Shire Council versus Tenterfield Shire Council partnering the DPC. The DPC have actually been working on this for 2 years already. Their net efforts, which I was very, very disappointed in, was to pay a consultancy to advise council that it would be a good idea to put photovoltaic cells in. I hope they didn't pay too much money for that. I knew that as soon as I saw the name of the consultancy that Waste to Energy wouldn't have been even considered, because the name of the company was 100% renewables. And the only thing they've done in the last 10 years was do PPAs, which is public-private arrangements for photovoltaic cells to go on microgrids. So not only did they not look at Waste to Energy, and I've been told, I won't mention the officer's name, that it was considered too hard, and it wasn't anything to do with energy, it was to do with waste, which is incorrect. And I find it quite bizarre that most of the people that are any Waste to Energy don't see councils as burying energy in the ground on one hand and digging it up on the other with the coal. I can't see why people can't see that. Energy coming out black and energy going in producible. It's still energy. So the DPC's project, which delivered PPAs for 5 companies that were pre-approved by local government procurement, mean that there's now a middleman between councils and the grid owner, which takes their profit. The grid owner takes a profit, and the distributor takes a profit. I'm not very happy with that. Having worked in the electricity industry for 9 years, I think councils should take the profit. And they should use that profit to lower the cost of the waste management. So, although I'm happy that the DPC actually understood that there should be a project, and the strategy was sound, the tactics and their end result was suboptimal. So I'm going to bring that up on Thursday as well, and that won't be very popular, but it's not a popularity contest. So as well as that, the OEH have what they call a regional energy coordinator, and their job is to coordinate energy regionally. I know firsthand that the regional energy coordinator who reports to the OEH weren't invited to the DPC regional energy coordination meeting at Armidale and Valna in February or March of this year. So even though the OEH, who reports to the same minister as the EPA, who reports to the Deputy Premier, even though they're in the same office and have the same minister, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing within government. That's well known now throughout the DPC and OEH and EPA, and also through the regional energy, also through the infrastructure coordinating group. So there's lots of challenges. The other challenge, which we saw on Tuesday afternoon with Craig Rewcastle, was his comment that there was a woman from St Mary's or out in the west that stood up and proudly said that she led a group with 20,000 signatures to stop the waste to energy plant going to Eastern Creek because it was going to pollute so much. And there was a cheer from her cadre within the room. And Mr Rewcastle then said, well, that actually technically isn't correct. There's no pollution in the plants anymore. They're highly technically advanced, but they're really expensive to clean the scrubbers out. And yes, they're extraordinarily expensive to clean the scrubbers, which take all the pollution out these days. Horrendously expensive, considered singularly, but they're not horrendously expensive when you consider the cost of transporting, burying, monitoring and controlling the leachate and methane for 20 or 30 years in a waste cell. Without doing the BCR on that and doing the maths, I put it to anyone that will listen that Macquarie Bank, who's not known for its social conscience, wouldn't invest $400 million in the largest waste-to-energy plant in Australia at Kawana in Perth unless there was a quid in it. And the 20 councils that have signed 20-year contracts to supply waste to Phoenix Energy, and the Mayor and myself met the CEO of Phoenix Energy on site in Kawana in their industrial estate where they're putting this plant. There is no way in the world that the Dutch Superannuation Fund and Macquarie Bank would tip $636 million into Australia's largest waste-to-energy plant if there wasn't a quid in it. And there is no way in the world that 20 councils would sign a 20-year agreement for gate fees to get rid of their waste if it was dearer and less risk than doing what they're currently doing. It's just not something that would be done. The Mayor and I visited the best run existing waste facility within the Perth metro area while we're over there. And the code, as councillors would know, that I use for that is that it was suboptimal. They were spending $8 million a year on this waste plant. They were accepting councils' waste from about 12 councils, and they were going backwards. They can't control their leachate. They're flat harvesting their methane. They use the methane they harvest to put through 3 generators, but it's so inefficient that they're only getting enough electricity to run the actual tip site and nothing else. The person that's running it's the best in the industry at managing leachate and managing methane, and they're really struggling, despite the fact that I think they're spending about 7.8, almost $8 million a year on it. And that was the best. So when you've got a council that's got an enormous number of resources, there's 170,000 people live in the city of Coburn. They've got enormous budgets, enormous resources, and they're struggling. And they've spent 6 years investigating waste to energy and come to the conclusion that it's their only option to lower the risk and lower the cost. It gives you quite comfort that you're on the right track. Tracks. What I'm looking at, or what I've seen to date, will not solve Tenterfield Shire Council or any other small council's waste to energy or waste problems. If there was a solution to solve our waste problem now through waste to energy, I wouldn't need to do a feasibility study on waste to energy at a local scale. Those last words are the most important. If we had a population of 200,000 people, and if we had the same or similar problems to Geelong, Ballarat, Bendigo, City of Coburn, Toowoomba, Ipswich, City of Rockingham, Town of Port Hedland, which by the way is where all the large waste to energy plants are being built at the moment around Australia, we would just copy what they're doing. We can't. Even if we join forces with Southern Downs Regional Council across the border, we will still have to come up with a plant that is suitable for a local scale, meaning less feedstock. And I'm sure that the environmental economists will come up with results, but as soon as you move waste long distances, you introduce social, economic, but more importantly environmental costs from the extra carbon produced anyway. So what you save on the slippy dip, you lose on the hurdy-gurdy. So the feasibility study that I've been pushing, and I'll talk about our partners in a minute, is to look at waste to energy at a local scale. It is not waste to energy with a $636 million plant that will do half the Perth metro area. It is a waste to energy plant that will do little councils. Partners. At the moment, in writing, we're partnered with Moree Plains Shire Council, who tipped their hat for 15,000 initially, and another 10, highly likely another 10. Regional Development Australia New England have tipped their hat for 20 grand, considering of 10 cash and 10 for the services of David Thompson, who by the way has been brilliant. Goulburn Mulwaree Council, which Goulburn and Mulwaree used to be separate until their amalgamation, but Goulburn Council, the Mayor was very impressed with the waste to energy presentation I did on the 3rd of August at the Country Mayors. So they wrote to me last Friday week, and offered 15,000. There's another council too on Tuesday. Whitsunday Regional Council, they've offered, which is not even in our state, they're funding 15,000. I spoke to the Mayor and General Manager of Burke, who were very interested. They want me to write to them today. I spoke to the Mayor of Lismore while I was down at the conference. He wants to put a mayoral minute up and kick the tin for 15,000. They've got a big problem. The General Manager of Hay Shire wants me to write to her today. Amanda, and I can't remember her surname. The Mayor of Murray wants me to write to him again today, despite the fact the Riverina and Murray Joint Organisation have supported it. They haven't tipped any money in yet. Forbes, the General Manager and Mayor of Forbes, who we saw on Sunday afternoon, wants more information and wants to be part of the study as well and keep the tin for 15,000. And there was one more, and I just can't think of that. It'll come to me. was like, Oh, Byron, yeah. Byron Bay wrote to me about 2 weeks ago asking me for the intellectual property that would help him do a feasibility study for it. And I wrote back to them and said, well, with respect, it's taken me 11 years, including 9 years in the electricity industry, to work out how to do this. I can't tell you how to do it on a page. And with respect, it'll be the cheapest $15,000 you've ever spent for me to do the work for you, since it's taken me 6 months. So they're our partners so far. The General Managers Group for New England is meeting week after next, I think, 6th. Meeting on the 6th. I've sent them a copy of the 14-page brief that went to ARENA. They met, or the JO met about 3 or 4 weeks ago and discussed their strategic plan. Energy has been included as their second highest priority. There is some misinformation even within the JO. One of the general managers is waiting for the department of the DPC, Department of Premier and Cabinet, to come up with the information such that they don't have to pay the $15,000. But what he doesn't realise is the DPC have got me on their panel and I'm the one doing the work. So if I don't get the $15,000, I can't supply the information to the DPC and he can't get it for nothing. So it's a bit of a catch-22 situation for that. So that's where we're up to. So with any luck, by COB on the 1st of November, we'll have a project champion with probably Mr. Harry Henderson within the regional infrastructure coordinating group. And Ken Gillespie. And Ken Gillespie, by the way, reports directly to the Premier. He's not affiliated with any of the departments. And hopefully by Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, we'll have some money off ARENA. I'm not expecting ARENA to fund the whole 420k. I'm expecting between 80 and 160k off ARENA, which will mean we're about half short unless we can get some more partners. I'm expecting the DPC to have a little bit of egg on their face in relation to the fact that they've gone to the councils and asked for representatives from each council to meet with their energy group to harvest information. If the information was harvestable, I would have already found it. The reason it's not harvestable is it's never been done, which is why the project is to develop or to check waste energy at a local scale. It's been done, as I said before, it's been done at a large scale all over the world. There's over 2,000 plants now. There's a new one approved somewhere in the world every 5 days. And I thought council was most of the information I get off the internet. I've set up Google Alerts about that. You would have seen the ones in Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Philippines, Singapore in the last month. Any questions? Councillor Berry.
Right, one of the byproducts of waste to energy or any energy by burning stuff is CO2. Have you approached any of the tomato greenhouse growers to see if they'd be interested in setting up a plant here? Because if they could, or would I should say, that would be another source of employment for the Shire.
Thanks, Councillor Berry. Good question. I haven't yet. When the Mayor and I went to Toowoomba, it may be news to some people, there's a pyrolysis plant being approved for Toowoomba that's going to take their whole industrial, their latest industrial estate off-grid. The byproduct is CO2, which is being on-sold to tomato growers, and the irony being is they can't supply them enough CO2, which I thought was extraordinarily ironic since there's so many people around Australia terrified about the byproduct. They're going to be converting used mining tyres into carbon, steel, road base and CO2. They're going to be supplying electricity to their industrial estate for 42% less than the same people could buy off the grid, and that's after they've made their profit. So the grid access charges in Queensland 42% of the cost of electricity, which is not surprising because they're pumping electricity from such long distances, they've got such large friction losses and such a large distribution to be able to do it. So what's happening at the moment, by the way, you can't buy shares in the company. I looked, it's a privately owned company, FKG Constructions. First thing I asked them when I saw their business model was, are you listed on the stock exchange? They're going to be importing tyres from Chile, Mexico and Brazil to convert to using a pyrolysis method in Toowoomba to sell electricity to the people in the industrial estate for 58% of the cost of electricity at the moment, with the byproduct used to grow tomatoes, of which they've had to knock people back because they can't build the pyrolysis machine fast enough. So yes, it's a brilliant idea. The other idea we got from a company called New Energy from Jason Pugh in Perth was that when you make steam, which spins turbines to make electricity, you've got a friction loss. And depending on what plant you use, it's anywhere between 30 and 60%. The old plants are fairly high, they're pretty hopeless. The new plants are pretty good. But he said you can reduce that friction loss even further by seeking industries that need steam. Because when you boil the water and to make the steam to spin the turbines, there's nothing saying that you can't use the steam directly in a manufacturing process. And one of the companies that sprung to mind was abattoirs, and the other industry that sprung to mind was linen. Also, Linen is a very large linen cleaning company. They've got the green and white trucks that run around everywhere. If council was able to do a waste to energy plant and take some of the transport miles off a company like that, what they'll save on transport, they'll spend on local jobs and local infrastructure. Abattoirs, as I said, abattoirs is one, but any company that needs steam or heat could piggyback off a waste to energy plant at a far reduced energy loss. Any company that could use CO2, and growing tomatoes is a classic, especially seeing that the tomato company that wanted to go into the Toowoomba industrial estate can't physically even build enough. They've doubled it already and hasn't even been built yet to cope with demand. They're knocking people back for energy up there that wants to move from New South Wales into Toowoomba because the energy prices are 42% less. New South Wales is going to lose a lot of industry to Queensland over this, because once this pyrolysis plant is done in Toowoomba, this company intends to set up plants all around Australia except New South Wales. So New South Wales, although they've got a waste to energy policy, need to become outcome focused, not prescriptive and regulatory focused. But the problem is when you come up with a policy and then legislation and then interpretation of that legislation and regulation, you tend to get people that are risk adverse, who want to keep their head below the parapet and aren't outcome focused. That's why I said that one of the things I want on Thursday is a project champion. I need someone that can sit above the EPA and the OEH to go directly to the Premier when there's a blockage and say that these people aren't outcome focused. Or one of the tricks that one of the consultants told me was that technically the EPA on many instances can say that they're supportive of a project, but they want more information, knowing that when they ask for study after study after study, the proponents will soon get sick of that and move their money elsewhere, which is what's happened in Leadenshire. The proponent down there has moved to Geelong, and what's happened with the pyrolysis plant that's gone to Toowoomba. Any further questions, Councillor Berry?
Yeah, just to add to that one, CE, I have to get that one right. The waste heat, other areas have used fish farming for using waste heat. They've actually done that on quite a few areas overseas where you've got the generators and you use the heat. The other thing is with greenhouses, this area here is much more suited to Toowoomba because cooling is one of the biggest drawbacks with a greenhouse in the subtropics. Whereas this area, we don't have a cooling problem, although maybe a few months in the summer, but not like Toowoomba. So we've got that advantage there if you ever approach them.
Yeah. The latest, yeah, I think so. No, I'll give up. The latest buzzword, and I don't think a lot of the politicians actually understand what they're talking about. The latest buzzword in Macquarie Street and also in Parliament House, Canberra, is the circular economy. And without trying to sound too technical, the circular economy is about continually reducing energy losses between one function and another. It's the second law of thermodynamics, if anyone wants to look it up. It's reducing entropy or entropic loss between one function and another. So getting protein from fish because you use the heat is reducing that loss, because you're not carting fish that grew up in warmer waters 2,000 kilometres to sell them over here in Brisbane, or importing them from Southeast Asia or Europe. To grow tomatoes within 3 hours of the Brisbane market, 365 days a year, is reducing that loss as well. To use it to clean sheets and clothes in the linen industry, to use it for cleaning and production of meats in the agricultural industry, is all about a circular economy. It's been around for a long period of time, but Westerners are only just catching on to it. The Chinese have been doing it for about 3,500 years. And actually, I think they might have copied off someone else as well. But circular economy is on the lips of government people at the moment. They see recycling as similar to a circular economy. The only thing I'd ask people to be aware of, though, is the circular economy doesn't work when there's a subsidy, because it's artificial. I'm just about to send councillors a scan that I did this morning. I was reading in the paper yesterday about how much energy is paid for from the rest of the grid before a wind farm generates 1 single kilowatt, and it's something like 700 kilowatts or something's got to be generated before they're efficient. If you took the subsidy off, would there be so many people still investing in them? Well, waste to energy is different than that. Waste to energy's got a fixed cost, because you've got a cost of transporting and moving and burying and then managing waste for decades. By not doing that, you get a head start of at least $80 or $100 a tonne. The other renewable industries don't have that head start. Solar's a bit different because it's much cheaper than wind to energy. It was subsidised for a very long period of time. Waste to energy doesn't need to be subsidised. Subsidisation of any product is linked to government policy or a very generous company or person making a subsidy. So with the circular economy, anything that's not subsidised that can stand alone in the commercial market will survive. So if that fish farming survives without a subsidy and makes a profit, it will beat other industries of similar ilk that have got to move that same protein thousands of kilometres eventually when the market wakes up to it. Any other questions? Tom?
Just to give you a bit of an insight, we grow tomatoes at home. I've got guys that grow at home. They also grow over the border in Queensland. And I think last year or the year before, they put in 240 k's of plastic, which they've got to get rid of. And that costs them around about 10 or 12,000 bucks to dump their plastic waste. So it'll give you a bit of an idea of the plastic they've got to get rid of.
And that plastic will be buried.
I don't know what they do with it, but anyway, it's got to go to the rubbish dump. Well, they used to dig a hole and dump it, but you can't do that now, as you well know.
Yeah, well, see, with something like the circular economy, if you can recycle it, that's better than waste to energy. providing you're not subsidising it, because that's just a false dawn. If it's not able to be recycled, releasing the entrapped energy before it goes in the hole and not putting in the hole not only means you've got to dig less coal up, but it means you're not wasting a natural resource that otherwise would be buried. So I can't see why the proponents that are anti-waste to energy can't understand that. Because even countries such as Sweden and Japan recycles 99% of its stuff, they've got 1,178 waste to energy plants for 1%, because their population is so large, of course. But you can't recycle everything. The more you recycle, the better. I would like to be in a position where I saw the world in 20 or 30 years to not even need waste to energy plants because we're so super efficient that we don't need them. I can't see that happening for a long period of time though. The packaging that we've got seems to be going up, not down. And despite the fact that people are more aware of it, they're more time poor and they buy things of convenience. In Japan, for example, you can buy a single boiled egg in a plastic box. All the bananas are wrapped individually, yet they recycle 99% of their product. So as society becomes more time poor, I see the amount of packaging going up, not down. And I see the need for not only better recycling, but I see the need for waste to energy going up, not down. It's inevitable as we get busier. Any other questions? Councillor Petrie?
I just want to, given the state of play in New South Wales, do you think, and with so many announcements just coming daily almost of new energy plants being built across the rest of Australia, do you think there's a dawning realisation in New South Wales that they're going to be left behind?
Yes, I do, but I don't think there's enough political courage in New South Wales. The classic example is the woman that was crying on TV saying that my children are going to get born with two heads in Eastern Creek because there's an incinerator going in. That incinerator was worth $750 million and had the equivalent pollution of 7 trucks driving past. That's it. If you look at the offset of the coal, it reduced the amount of pollution from that would be caused from burning the coal across the other side of the mountains 33-fold. But the word incinerator, people think of the old incinerator from the 60s and 70s that used to smoke Sydney out, where everyone used to light up their rubbish on Sunday afternoons and you couldn't see anything. And I just remember as a kid driving down to my uncle's place and the whole Hornsby just covered in smoke from the incinerator, particularly in autumn when people burning their leaves, until that was outlawed. Older people still remember that and they see waste to energy plants as incinerators. When I mentioned the word incinerator to Jason Pugh and the gentleman from Phoenix Energy, they said we only wish to build the 36 megawatt plant in Kawana, $636 million. It wouldn't take that much to build an incinerator. And the reason that the council and the Western Australian government approved it is because there's 40 of these exact plants, exactly the same size throughout the world, and they've got data going back 5 years and there's no pollution from them. Jason Pugh from New Energy made the comment that they hired an environmentalist when they were doing their proposal for the city of Rockingham and the town of Port Hedland, and Krakenite on the Swan River, which happens every New Year's Eve, made the equivalent of 4 years worth of pollution from the largest waste to energy plant in the world on one night.
So just maybe that's the terminology that's required, the comparison of Krakenite to 4 years of pollution, to comparison of 7 trucks, and compare how many trucks are going from Sydney up to Ipswich at the moment, rather than in numbers and figures. I just remember once a fellow was there talking about pollution and he was talking about parts per million and everyone was all anti, and then someone said, well, what is that in real terms? He said it was a grain of sand in an Olympic swimming pool of sand. Completely changed the outcome. So maybe it's that type of terminology and language is required to convince people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One of the problems is, if you think of a project as an onion and onion rings, the people looking at the pollution from the waste to energy plant in Eastern Creek looked at number one, they were in Creek, they looked at it as an incinerator, but number two, they looked at it as Eastern Creek. If you had done a proper social, environmental and economic study with it, the number of million kilometres that those trucks, there's 60,000, and it's 1,000 k's roughly from Eastern Creek to Ipswich. If you look at the risk based on how many people get killed per million kilometres by trucks, the social cost for councils in Sydney moving that waste from Eastern Creek to Ipswich is hundreds of millions of dollars based on the mathematical probability of how many people get killed over that period of time. I will bet that when the councils that entered into that agreement with Ipswich, they didn't consider that cost. They didn't look at it from an onion ring that was far enough out. The further you go up, and the more of an eagle view you take with waste to energy, the better it becomes. I spoke to Angus Witherby, who's the Director of Environment and Planning at Moree. To move a tonne of soft plastics from Moree to India could hardly be environmentally sensitive. The moment Malaysia, as of last week, Malaysia stopped taking our waste as well, so I think there's only 2 countries left that are taking it. One of them's India. And I don't know about you, but I've never seen a state-of-the-art anything in India to do with pollution. And I suspect that it's just Australia pushing their waste somewhere else, where it's someone else's environmental problem, but we've ticked all of our boxes. But we don't live in a tent that the atmosphere that's made in India isn't one day breathed by people living in Australia. We all live on the one planet. So moving the risk and moving the pollution from Australia to another country isn't acceptable. Bearing it and having methane come off for the next 30 to 50 years and having leachate escape and go into a water supply and saying some other generation will fix that up. Well, we're fixing up mistakes that were made 25, 30 and 35 years in Tenterfield. We've only got a few. Where I came from previously had 13. I was still fixing stuff up that was done in the 50s at Eden. That's not good management because you're nibbling away your future economic prosperity. So that's got to come into it, which is why an environmental economist is very important. The other person I intend to, or group of people I intend to hire, is someone that's got a doctorate in chemical engineering. Because when someone says to me, some well-meaning but ill-informed middle manager from somewhere says, oh, that won't work because of this, I want to be able to say, well, sorry, but the professor of chemical engineering from Macquarie University disagrees with you, and so does all his PhD students and post-doctorate people doing thesis, postdoctoral students. They tend to disagree with you as well. Try again. Because what's happening, because there isn't one, and there isn't a small waste to energy plant in the country, there's no data or there's nothing for the EPA or OEH or a council to go back on and say, yes, this will work, we can prove it because of X plan, because there isn't an X plan anywhere. So because there isn't, I need to make sure that I hire someone that their reputation is irrefutable, such that they can assess the technology, and perhaps it'll mean sending them somewhere where there's similar technology in the world and monitoring it or doing whatever they've got to do, such that I can say to the EPA, yes, there isn't one in Australia. Yes, but Professor Vlad Strzelecki, who's been teaching chemical engineering at Macquarie University for 25 years and considered one of the best chemical engineers in the Southern Hemisphere, says it will work, and he's been to Tokyo and he's been to Switzerland, he's had a look, and he wouldn't have put his professional reputation on it. That's the level I think we're going to need to get around the EPA in New South Wales, since not a single plant has been approved, even at the concept stage, in New South Wales. Yet Victoria's got half a dozen of them, Western Australia's got 3, Queensland have announced 2, and every 4 or 5 days there's one built in somewhere else around the world.
There was also an argument by Craig Rucastle on Tuesday afternoon that Sweden just want to sell their technology to the rest of the world, and they're actually now importing waste. Well, I'd put it to anyone that's prepared to listen, the only reason they'd be importing waste is because the countries they're getting it from aren't as efficient as what Sweden is in releasing the energy from it and putting it back into the grid. If they were so inefficient, they wouldn't be able to manage the waste at such a low gate charge, still within the pollution control standards, and make money on it. So I've got no problems with that, and I've got no problems with the Swedes and the Japanese are in Hitachi and a company from Sweden that joined forces. They've built about 500 plants around the world. I've got no problems with the Swedes exporting their technology if it's the best in the world. I don't see that as a valid argument. I see it as an argument for wasteful energy. If they're that bloody hopeless, would they have sold 500 plants throughout the world? And the answer is no. They would have gone broke after the first 2 or 3. Any other questions?
I think, Mr CEO, in the interest of getting through the agenda, that might be the start of your
Thank
next
you,
report.
Acting Mr. Mayor.
We might knock a couple of items over and then get some more into us. Recommendations for items to be considered in confidential section. Item COM 20-18, item ECO 24/18, item ECO 25/18, item ECO 26/18. I need a mover and a seconder to take up that recommendation to go into confidential, please. From Petrie, Brian Murray, thank you very much. Open Council reports our community, item COM 18/18, the 2019 Australia Day Awards on page 31 of your hard copy. The recommendation is there. We call nominations for the various categories listed there. In item 2, the nominations for the 2019 Australia Day Awards open on Monday the 29th of October and close on the 14th of December. Item 3, that the judging by the Australia Day selection panel be undertaken on the 3rd of January. Any mover and a seconder to deal with the motion, please? Gary Berry.
Question, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes.
Somewhere along the line, we said we're going to accept nominations throughout the year.
If you read in the report, Councillor, you will see that that has been happening. This is the formalisation of the process.
Has there been many nominations?
I believe from memory and reading the report, there was 1 maybe or 2.
One.
1, thanks, Councillor McNish. So is your question moving on to being the person that wants to move the motion to consider the matter? Gary Berry, second from Petrie. Any discussion? Councillor McNish.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I think we've got to have a close look at this. It's getting to the embarrassing stage where, we advertise, we nominate, we go and do it ourselves, and people just don't seem to be interested. There's nothing else I don't think we can possibly physically do to get interested in this whole process. I don't know what the answer is. If the nominations aren't there, the awards doesn't mean as far as I'm concerned. And I think we're going to take a hard look at this and see, is it worthwhile continuing with this whole process?
Is there an amendment or an alternative motion there, Councillor?
No, just something I thought I'd mention. I think most of us feel the same way, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Now the motion's fine, but I think we've got to start looking at it.
Okay, noted. Any other comment? Councillor Berry?
Yeah, that was along the line of my question, Mr. Mayor, because I think the one that's there may be one of from somewhere else that really wanted to go along that path, and it wasn't just eligible from at the time.
Okay.
So,
any other further comment before I ask that the motion be put? Councillor Petrie?
So it's going to go obviously in the pre. We've had 1 nomination so far. So are we going to do any extra advertisement of it between now and the closing date?
One would hope that we do something proactive and stress in there that unless the community interest is there, that we do not consider the resources we're currently putting to it are worthwhile, because the community doesn't rate it.
Can I suggest that perhaps the mayor could do an interview with 210FM and some other types of proactive activities such as that to prompt people?
In his absence, I think it sounds like an excellent idea. The officer's recommendation is there, councillors, all in favour? Against? Carried. We'll do one more. Item CON 1918, the recommendation in regard to the Tenterville Shire National Monument Project. The recommendation is the council resolve to facilitate a workshop for councillors and community members to assist with the planning concept phase of the Tenterville National Monument Project, noting a possible future budget adjustment of approximately $8,000. It's come from the Office of the Chief Executive. Do you want to deal with it?
Three.
Sorry. Thank you, Nolan. I need a mover and a seconder to consider the recommendation. Brian Murray, Gary Berry, thank you. Terry.
Through Mr. Mayor, it's actually not additional funding. It's actually moving funding from one section to the other. So it's not actually adding $8,000 to the operational plan.
Any questions of the CEO? Ronald Bridget?
Yeah, the reference on page 35 to the relocated and restored J.F. Thomas House in Garth. What is that?
I'm not 100% sure with the details at the moment, but there was an idea mooted by the architect to move the TJ Thomas House to, actually I know where it's going to be moved to, but I'd rather keep that confidential at this stage, to move the TJ Thomas House more centrally within the business district of Tenterfield to align with the other monuments that are here. So that will be part of the $12 million grant funding that was asked for, but it's a long way off. It's at the end of the long list of things that were on the draft concept plan, but that's what it was.
Any other questions?
Sorry, well, I'll just be a bit concerned if the current owners of that house haven't been consulted. If they suddenly read that here, it's a bit in the face.
Through you, Mr. Deputy. Are we talking about the house on Mount Mackenzie Road going to war?
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, I think so, Councillor. As I said, this project has largely been, up to this stage, has been done at no charge by Mr. Robert Perry, the architect, and that's one of the reasons why this report came to council before things started getting out of hand. I wanted public consultation and everyone to be aiming towards the same dot on the horizon. At the moment there's lots of different dots, and many people have spoken about it for many different years, not necessarily the moving of the TJ Thomas House, but all different things that could happen in Tenterfield, and I think now's as good a time as any to get everyone corralled and aimed towards the same objective, so that we can put the grant applications in as they arise.
Councillor Petrie?
Yeah, so just to follow on from my original thing, I think we're all very supportive of the idea. That was the only bit that gave me some pause. It was almost just a presumption, and I personally would prefer that wasn't in the report until such time as the workshop explored potentials and whether it actually fits heritage to move a building from its site. Thank you.
Councillor Hill?
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor. I was just down in Victoria the other day, and I've seen some of the Ned Kelly towns and the amount of effort some of these towns have gone to preserve Ned Kelly's era town in the gold mining parts. They've gone through the main street and redid all their, whereas a rock, they redid theirs. It was rock the whole, what do you call those spoon drains that are made out of rock? I think ours was the same about quite a few years.
I think we've covered it. The recommendation's there. All in favour? Against? Carried. Can I have a mover to suspend standing orders to go to morning tea? Gary Geary, seconder. Brian Murray. We'll break for 20 minutes for morning tea. Okay, the next item of business, Brian Petrie and Tom Petrie. Item ECO 23/18, the unnamed right of carriageway off Mole River Road. The officer's recommendation is there, and those items 1, 2 and 3. Another mover and a seconder to deal with that, please. Gary Berry and Bob Rogan. Thank you. Terry's going to give the report.
Unless there's any questions, the report's pretty self-explanatory. Family Lane Stone, as listed on page 39, it's pretty self-explanatory, and I've got the officer that assists in ongoing inquiry. If there's any questions in relation to that.
Any questions? Easy. The recommendation's there. All in favour? Against? Carried. Next item on the agenda is item ENV 21/18, short-term rental accommodation in New South Wales. The officer's recommendation is the council lodge a submission in support of the exhibited proposed changes to the New South Wales planning system to enact the planning framework announced in the New South Wales government policy on short-term rental accommodation. Moving a second to deal with it. Brian Murray, Bob Rogan. The Office of the Chief Corporate Officer.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to hand over any questions to Tremaine, who put together the report from councillors, and see what we've been doing.
Any questions? Councillor Berry?
Just one. How does this fit in with those businesses that already are registered and they've got to pay an extra, what do you call it, business rates for those businesses? I believe it will have an adverse effect on those businesses.
I'll take that because it's a rates one. The categorisation, we have a slightly separate process. So the Act prescribes how we'll apply the categorisation to those properties based on the determination of their primary use. So once this comes into force, then it would still be up to those sections of the Act to apply in terms of categorisation for rating.
So it won't affect the businesses that are already there, it won't put them in a disadvantage because the new businesses may have to pay that business rate, is that correct?
How we would need to deal with that in future is to undertake a categorisation assessment of property. So if we became aware that we thought a property was incorrectly categorised for the purpose of rating, that would be separate to a planning issue. That's actually the rating side of it.
Yeah.
So in terms of that, it would be done on an ad hoc basis whereby we had a complaint or a request for a category review, as we would do now with any property that would move from residential to a business to farmland, depending on the primary use of that property as determined.
So basically all that stuff very similar to what it is down there, as far as rating goes.
Yes, there would be no change.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Councillor Brian Petrie?
Yeah, I have several. I thought this short-term rental thing was to do with the explosion of Airbnbs, is that correct?
Through Mr Deputy Mayor, yes.
Right, well in that case, why then does it say that this does not include tourist and visitor accommodation? I thought that was the whole purpose of it.
Through Mr Deputy Mayor, it's a separate definition. So tourist and visitor accommodation can mean things like multiple cabins on a rural property or eco-tourist facility. So tourist and visitor accommodation has a set definition in our LEP. I haven't got it in front of me at the moment, but there's a set definition. And what it does, at the moment, this type of accommodation sits under tourist and visitor accommodation. What this proposal, what the state government's proposing is that we take it out and make it its own definition. So it's separate to tourist and visitor accommodation. Whilst it is still obviously a form of tourist and visitor accommodation, it's really a legalistic way to deal with it separately and to only allow this type of development as either exempt or complying with the state policy.
I mean, to me that's, my question is coming from the government's explanatory document, nothing from today. And it says it's proposed to define short-term rental accommodation or STRA as the commercial use of an existing dwelling, either wholly or partially, for the purposes of short-term accommodation, but does not include tourist and visitor accommodation. So to me, the pub test is, someone from Brisbane says, oh, I'm going to come down to the Peter Allen Festival, I've got to look up Airbnb. and someone in here says, well, I can't do Airbnb because the people who come and stay in my house are tourists and visitors. Well, if you read the wording of the state government document, they're saying that the very people who are supposed, this is supposed to be for, the very people who are saying who can't use it. Is that purely because of defined definition of what a tourist and visitor accommodation is? Because to me that is as clear as mud.
Through Mr Deputy Mayor, the definitions are only used for planning approval processes. So that you can advertise and call your facility whatever you like. In terms of the definitions, these are just the legislated definitions. Like we have to define anything, whether it's a recreation facility indoor or a recreation facility outdoor. When we look at a proposal, from council's perspective, it needs to fit under a definition. So it needs to fit in a box somewhere in terms of its defined use. So the terminology that the public might use, or Airbnb, or whatever online forum you might use, doesn't limit you as to what you call it. We purely use these definitions for planning purposes.
Right, so if anything goes out publicly about this, we would have to make it very clear to people, or people who are reading our LEP, if we put this in, have to make it very clear that the short-term rental actually does include visitors and tourists, but not as part of our planning definition, just so that people out there who may be interested, then don't go, oh, well, I can't do it because of this. And then coming from what Gary said, so our existing, if we approve this, our existing homestays around town, there's one up opposite Stanham, there's a few others around the place. Does that mean that they can therefore delist their properties as a business and simply run off this instead?
It doesn't impact the categorisation. You still need to meet the categorisation test for rating, which is separate to planning. So they're within the Local Government Act, that one is contained. And so same with farmland, you have to be categorised as farmland. You actually have to demonstrate that that is the use that is undertaken on the land. So you'll have the same issues occurring on small blocks where people say it's a block and I'm farming unless they can demonstrate generating sustainable income from that under the Act. Same thing with business, you've got to demonstrate that it's a business and that you're generating a level of income that makes it commercial. So, for example, if a property was only used for that use and we got a request to go and look at recategorisation from a financial perspective, then we would apply those determinations from the Act, not what's in the planning side.
Okay, that's still clear to know. If I've got a house and I don't live in it, and all I do is rent it out for holidays, okay, that's very clear that that is therefore a business and would be rated as such. But if this goes in, if I have a house that I live in and I have an additional house on the same block with this, which this allows for 2 dwellings or whatever, and I have been renting that additional house out as visitor accommodation, I could then, if this is approved, go back to being a residence and just sublet that other granny flat or whatever under the STRA rather than being a registered accommodation provider, correct?
To a level, because that's where we get into things, you know, we're talking about what we're actually using it for, which is for people to reside in, and that's the juxtaposition between commercial and residential at this point in time. So if you lease a property that you own to a third party, that doesn't necessarily make it commercial, it is still residential despite the fact that you are generating an income from that rental property. So if you own a rental property in Tenterfield, you rent it out for 12 months, its categorisation is still residential because there is somebody actually living in that particular premise. Whereas a motel or a hotel, they're in the business of providing those levels of accommodation. So it comes back, and I think the 510s is where it starts in the Act, on what is categorised for the purpose of rating, which, bearing in mind this particular report is talking about the planning definitions and how that's applied, not necessarily the rating categorisation of properties, which is in itself a complex area that you'll see later in this agenda item with some of the other councils actually dealing with the interpretation of capitalisation.
Sorry, but this is an important decision we're making today, so, and there's no limit on questions, as I understand in the meeting procedures. If I'm living in a house and on my same block of land, I have another house. And I'm currently a business because that other block, that I'm living in my house, the other house, I have people come and stay there and I've got it on the tourist side, etc., etc. If we as council approve this, instead of that being rated as a business, by rights, if we approve this, which is now allowing this to happen with more than one building on your one block of land, as per the government's information, those people who have got two buildings on their block of land and they live in one, so it is a dwelling, but they're registered as a business because, rated as a business because they also have the second building on that block that they are renting out on short stay as holiday accommodation. They could technically come back to being just residential and use the provisions of what we might pass today to then do the short-term rental stay of that second building on the one block of land that they currently have.
So, to the best of my knowledge, as we said, the processes are separate. We're talking about whether or not they need development assessment, not their determination for rating. So that would be on a case-by-case basis, and as I said, I can forward you the section of the Act that classifies a business that we would apply for rating, but this particular process wouldn't have an impact on that. This is for the development and assessing whether or not people actually need to apply to council for that particular usage.
But belaboring the point, but it has to be clear. If we pass this today, if I didn't currently have a holiday business, but I had two buildings on my block of land, as some people in town do with their holiday stays, I can then go, oh, you council are now allowing me to rent out that second home between 180 and 365 days a year, providing I do the fire alarms, and it doesn't actually require a DA. What I'm asking is that people have already gone and done the DA to allow that to happen under the existing rules. It may be a separate issue, but this would allow a pathway then, am I right, that they can then go back to not being a business, they can go back to being just purely residential and still run this business under the new provisions.
Through Mr Deputy Mayor, regardless of whether they've got existing consent or future operators operate under here, is irrelevant to the rating. So the two pieces of legislation don't talk to each other in terms of development consent and rating. We sort of go through this issue quite a lot when people get their rates notice and they say they're rated as residential, they say, but I'm on a rural property, or I'm rural and it's rated residential, or vice versa. The planning legislation under the Environmental Planning Assessment Act just sets out when you do and don't need consent for different types of activities. It doesn't dictate to the Local Government Act how it's rated. That's a completely separate process that does not cross over. So they run separately. So regardless, I mean, as I said in our report in September last year, we had 11 applications for tourists, what we call at the moment, tourist and visitor accommodation, to rent out whole houses, whether it's an additional house or a separate home in town or in rural properties. That consent is still valid and they can still operate under that. If they chose to surrender that consent and operate under this, it has no impact on rating at all. There's no crossover in terms of the planning legislation and the rating legislation, and it's completely separate.
There are some accommodation places here that are currently rated business. So, which I mean, it may be a separate thing. I don't care if they talk to each other or not. What I care about, if I'm that person who's currently rated business, paying a lot more rates a year than someone who's paying a residential rate, if we pass this today, can they then become, like any future people who then go, I'm going to go start doing Airbnb and I'll meet these regulations, I can still stay as a resident, according to this, and pay residential rates, and I can still have people come and stay. The people who are currently doing it and who are paying business rates All I'm asking is, are they going to be disadvantaged because they will continue to pay business rates, whereas the neighbour might be doing exactly the same thing, but being defined as a residence, are paying less rates, or can the business people, if they choose to, providing they meet that rating thing, go back to being a residence and residential rates, and under this pathway, then go off and do their Airbnb or short-term holiday stuff?
I was just actually trying to find the section of the Act to give councillors the reading about how we go. I can't find it at this point in time, but as Tomei said, the passing of this is about lodging development applications, etc., for a prescribed activity. Once again, we would actually go and apply the rates based on the requirements of the Local Government Act as to which category that they then fall into. So, you know, there just isn't that crossover other than the definitions of what provides a business under the Local Government Act, which is what I was sort of trying to find to give you those definitions.
Sorry, it does have a crossover in consequence. It may not affect how you apply this in planning, but it certainly will affect existing businesses who've already gone down that pathway if they cannot then go back down and become purely residential again. If they are currently rated as business, some people who are just renting out their homes or whatever are still residential, but other people are registered as business and pay business rates. So under that consequence, not whether it affects business.
Sorry, I misunderstood the question. You can apply for a recalculation of rating of your rating category anytime you like. So anytime that there is actually a change to your business operation, so if you say had a small block and you weren't deriving income, didn't meet that particular test, at any time you can recategorise. Obviously people don't come and see us for a recategorisation if it is going to be to their detriment, only to wind back things where they think that they might get a potential benefit. So that's where we need to be proactive on the front foot in terms of continually assessing those categories of different businesses based on the feedback that we get. But you can certainly retract it and ask at any time to have your property recategorised in accordance with the local government act.
Okay, so if we pass this, they are still deriving a business because it's still a business, but under this new planning pathway, it means that they didn't have to register as a business in the first place if they go and do it tomorrow as opposed to having done it last week, is what I'm getting at. If they're existing business, they wish to continue as a business. But under this, if we pass this today, under these new provisions, they could operate under this, which does not require them to be a business as such. That's all I'm trying to get at. And I'm sorry for not somehow.
I'm allowing your questions, councillor, because I've been approached, as I believe all of us have had an email from one business that feels that they are being disadvantaged under this, and I'm quite happy to have all the questions asked so that we can vote on this particular recommendation with the information rather than half guessing. Councillor Murray, did you have a point?
Through you, Mr. Deputy. Yeah, and this may be relevant or maybe not. Public liability insurance, when this is, if they flick from one to the other, what happens there? I mean, you may not be able to answer this.
Through Mr. Deputy Mayor, liability insurance, if it's not an activity carried out on council land, council doesn't require any copy of liability insurance at their own individual matter.
So effectively, you do not have to sign the document?
Not for private property.
Just before we go on, I think another point of clarity that Tomei just mentioned too, in terms of that recommendation, we're talking about lodging a submission in accordance to council's previous resolution. This is not council actually adopting a document. This is a submission that we either support or we don't support that document as it exists. So this won't come into force through council per se. It's based on a submission for the document which will be New South Wales by.
Councillor Reagan, did you have a point?
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor. I've just got a couple of small ones. I understand it's a submission in support of what the government want to do. So what I'm interested in, what's the current regulation state? If these are the changes we're being asked to support, currently, what's the issue with the number of days for a start? I don't know,
Through Mr Deputy Mayor, the current situation is detailed in that council report of 27 to September 2017. Our current provisions mean that for conversion of dwellings to any type of accommodation, so commercial accommodation, however you want to define it, as a bed and breakfast or tourist and visitor accommodation, or having someone come in on a commercial basis, requires a DA to be lodged. And in that report, I went through in detail that these are they're a low impact issue. We don't have issues with them. We're not Byron Bay, but they do have a lot of issues with them. So we've had no complaints about this type of activity going on. And as I said, in the 5 years previous to September 2017, we had 11 DAs issued. And councillors, in terms of quarterly reviews and quarterly reports, we did actually identify that we would undertake an audit of any of those facilities that were being advertised on the various online forums. However, that investigation was put on hold when in September 2017 the state government brought out these provisions. Because it really was determined by the state government and councils across New South Wales, then the majority of locations, this type of development is low impact. We really don't need to have our hand in it, to use a term.
Thanks to Mayor, thanks Deputy Mayor. Look, I understand that it's got a little concern impact-wise to council and all of that, and I do understand that, but it seems like a concern to other businesses though, and that's what Councillor Fidgey over here is talking about. We all read the email, we all know where it come from. But I think it's valid, so my next question is, with the 365-day limit, I'm wondering why we can't pare that back to 180, because it seems to me that might take some of the pressure off current businesses. We do the ability to recommend we do that, I think. And it also says that 365-day limit, if at any stage that's an issue, council has the option to reconsider that through an LEP amendment. So I'm just wondering how problematic at the time an LEP amendment would be. Is that a small process?
Through Mr Deputy Mayor, no, it's not. Can be time consuming. If council wishes to, in the actual document in attachment 1, if councils want to reduce that number of days, councils are invited to provide an expression of interest back to the department as to why they feel that the 365 should be reduced either down to the 180 or at some number in between. So there is an option there to do that. If we don't do that, if councils don't do that, the statewide policy will apply, and for regional areas it's 365 days. The ability to use the premises 365 days. It's not saying that it would potentially be used for that amount of time.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Quick question.
Councillor Peters.
Okay, now, as you well know, that there's a number of properties that have shearing sheds on them, right? And they've been done up, and they've been used for rental accommodation. Now, do they require a DA do they have to be reclassified as a business? They're not used all the time, they might be used once a month, maybe once every 6 weeks, sometimes when the school holidays on that, used very regularly. What actual legislation are they got to go through, or is it just all right to go ahead and do what they've been doing for years?
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, this legislation change purely relates to existing dwellings that have been approved by council. So issues around farm stay accommodation, whether it's use of shearing sheds or workers accommodation, is dealt with separately as a separate definition. There's actually a separate definition for farm stay accommodation. Any type of accommodation, whether it's 3 months of the year for tourists and visitors, does require council consent under the current LEP provisions, and that's statewide, and all LEPs require consent for that type of development.
With the indulgence of the other councillors, I'm a little bit hamstrung sitting over here rather than over there, so I might just ask a couple myself. The person that contacted us all has some very genuine concerns, and just in the interest of equality and a fair go for everybody, if we approve this recommendation as is, we're merely endorsing the submission as it is, and any local issues that arise out of it we can deal with on a case-by-case basis so that we keep a fair and even approach to everybody. Is that a fair summary of it?
Yes, Mr Deputy Mayor, the submission that went to the councillors highlights a number of matters of concern, obviously. Primarily, my understanding is that it relates to the rating categories, which this does not impact at all. If this legislation does not go through, it won't change anything in terms of the rating side of things. And again, I'm not the rates expert, and that's what Kyle's explaining that. So regardless of whether these people had a development consent or they didn't have a development consent either before or now, when this legislation comes in, the rating is not related to that. So
The other issue that seemed to come through was that there's been certain provisions that they've met to pay their extra $1,000 in rates, which other parties that might come on board later haven't had to meet or may not have to meet. And the lighting and the integration, join them up together, of the lighting with the smoke detectors, which adds anywhere between $1,500 and $1,700, something like that, to their overall operating expense, seems to be an issue. So we treat everybody the same under that?
Yes, Mr Deputy Mayor, the provisions will allow for that development to be classified as exempt, provided they meet those requirements. Council doesn't get involved in inspecting or enforcing that. There is also a code of conduct for the industry which will be administered and monitored through fair trading legislation, so that will monitor that side of it. So it's no different to our current exempt provisions that, you know, say 10 years ago you needed to develop an application to put up a farm shed. You don't now. Legislation changes, and while some people have had to lodge applications in the past, you may not now, and that's just how we deal with the legislation, trying to make it a bit simpler for people.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I have one more from Councillor Petrie and then one from Councillor Rogan, and then we'll put it to the vote. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, my questions actually came from our workshop last year, really, our discussions that we had then. And actually, if you read the email, they're actually saying not to limit it, but to let it happen for 365 days of the year, actually. So my issue is in relation to the fire alarms, the public liability, and whether it's 180 days down to 365. If council doesn't check on those things, who does? And if we were to go down the path of limiting it to 180 days or 210 or whatever, how would council know how many days the building's let anyway through the year? I mean, to me, how would you regulate that or administer that? That would be nearly impossible unless you sat outside and counted people going in.
Yes, through Mr Deputy Mayor. So what the state government has proposed is a dual, I guess, regulatory process. Council won't have any involvement if it classifies as exempt development and has no powers, but through the fair trading legislation, there's a code of conduct that's being developed, so that's contained in that document in the attachments. So implemented through amendments to planning instruments and fair trading legislation. So there will, what the proposal is that there will be requirements perhaps to register with fair trading for these businesses, who will then regulate that.
Councillor Rogan?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I think the bulk of what I wanted to ask has already been asked. But if I can, a little bit just about the regulation or lack thereof, Council, as to May has indicated, will not be involved because there's no requirement to do that, and there's no powers to do that. So if there were issues, perceived issues even from either clients or other businesses or anybody else, their avenue would only be through fair trading. I just want to make sure that's correct.
Through Mr Deputy Mayor, in part, yes. If council is notified in writing that there is a belief that it doesn't meet those requirements, council can investigate that, and as we do now, we perhaps are notified of a building that's being constructed, we would investigate that and determine whether or not it meets the exempt criteria. But we certainly don't issue any approvals or endorsements for exempt activities. It's designed to be a self-assessment process. So I use the farm shed example again. If you meet the criteria, we send out that information to people. They're required to meet that criteria. If they don't, that's when we would come in and do the regulation.
Thanks, Mayor. Before I put the recommendation, I think it's important to acknowledge the thanks for the answering of the questions that you've both done for us, because my personal opinion, which I've expressed to the Mayor previously, is we need to ask the robust questions on the way through to ensure that we know what we're making the proper decisions on, rather than half guessing, and we're not trying here to take pot shots at you. We respect the fact that you put a recommendation up, given us the background answers to our questions, so that we can get a better result for everybody involved. So the recommendations there, councillors, all in favour? Against? Carried. Item GOV 74/18, Chief Executive Officer Performance Review. The recommendations there, one, that we note the Mayor's report confidential attachment and support the findings of the committee on the CE's high level of performance over the 12-month period to October 2018. Endorse the 3 specific priorities for the CE in the next review period, namely align the asset management plan with the long-term financial plan, explore opportunities for treasury loans and continue the staff cultural improvements, including an employee engagement survey and 360-degree reviews for the leadership team and managers. And 2, having regard for the high level performance of the Chief Executive Award, 2.5% increase in the Chief Executive's total remuneration package, effective from his anniversary service being 16/10/2018 in accordance with clause 83 of the contract of employment. I'll move in a second, please. Bronwyn Petrie and Tom Peters. Any questions? Councillor Murray?
Through you, Mr Deputy. If we were to get approved by, my question is to if we were approved by TCOR for those loans, does that mean we could transfer those loans to the existing loans that we have already? Can we transfer over? That's probably
Now I'll ask, we've actually mitigated some of that, and I'll get Todd Colin to speak to it.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Hare. So what we did with the last loan that we actually took out was took it out for a shorter term. You can't get refinancing through TCorp. The loan must be due or called at that point in time. And you'll remember we've had some conversations about the last loan we took out, actually only taking it out for a 3-year period with a view to transferring that to TCorp at that point in time should we be successful. So the short answer is they won't refinance, but if you take it out over a longer period of time, the answer is no. If you structure it in such a way that it matures, then you can actually go back and ask TCorp to fund the loan that's matured.
May I ask, to restructure that, how do you restructure, how do such things up? I'm just curious.
So we've already done that. So we've actually entered into a term agreement that is for 3 years, as opposed to the loan, which would well be 20 years.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Recommendations there, councillors. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item GOV 75/18, the monthly operational report for September 2018. Recommendations, the council receives and notes the status of the monthly operational report for September 2018. Move and second to deal with it. Bob Rogan, Gary Beery. So yeah.
I'll just take, it's up to council, but I'm happy to take questions by exception, and can you let me know the page number, please?
Any questions? Councillor Petrie.
Thank you. I have several. I was just wondering, with our bridges, which is obviously on everyone's mind, and the application has gone in, just wondering what response there might have been with that. So the page 157, but you don't have the page, you know, it's not that anyway. Just the application under the community, the country roads.
Okay, there's a couple in at the moment. There's one just recently gone in on the 15th of September under the Fixing Country Roads. Got no idea of how that's going. It's only a week and a bit ago. There's one under the economic development under strong country communities. What's the name of that one, Kyle? Is that correct?
The Economic Development Fund.
There's about 3 names and they're all very similar, and one state, two state, one federal one. And I keep getting the names mixed up, but we had a growing local economies. We've got 3 bridges in under growing local economies. Hootens over Emu Creek, Beery Creek and Bunabanu bridges.
And I might ask Kylie to mention what the state government asked of us in the last couple of days that I found out this morning about those, Kylie.
Yeah, I guess one of the things was, and I'm not familiar enough with the projects to have the terminology, but one of their questions back to us was whether or not we applied under the appropriate stream, and our response back to them was, whichever stream you'd like to pop us under, we're more than happy to go under. So there's still some argy-bargy about the, I guess, about the application and whether or not it's suited to one stream or the other, which is more so bureaucratic than anything else, but I guess it gives you some comfort that we're managing those ongoing and that we're also getting that feedback in at this point in time.
Yeah, and I might add to that, that's despite the advice on multiple occasions from Peter Sneakers, who's in the DPC, who advises which stream to go under, which, as I said in my presentation before, it's very difficult, depending on who assesses something in one department, to even for the left hand to know what the right hand's doing, and this is a classic example of that. It's immaterial though, because the quality of the application was such that I don't think there'll be an issue with that. We actually asked Transport for New South Wales to check the application before it was made for the Fixing Country Roads application, and we actually asked Peter Sneakers to check the application under the Stronger Regional Communities Fund before the grant was put in, and our member for Lismore, we actually asked him to have a look at the application as well, and his response back was extraordinarily professional, and he was very happy with it. So council's done everything it can for these applications. Similar to the 2.3 million growing local economies one, we've been told mid-August, then we got told late August, then we got told early September, then we got told mid-September, and now we don't know when they're going to make the announcement. There seems to be shifting stands and moving goalposts with all of these grant procedures, and we're just doing it best as we go along.
I think that we've got this election coming up.
I was going to say congratulations I received congratulations from Council this morning on the vegetation management and the road work on Black Swamp Road. People there thought it was great. Also, congratulations to council staff for how pleasant they are. And to our ongoing workplace safety staff, and I see Wingbill RFS are up and running with that approval for the shed signing at long last. But I was wanting to know is page 48, training of outdoor staff referred to the crane, but all the other staff, other training didn't seem to mention any additional machinery skills. I was just wondering what's happening there. And that also applies to page 52 under the threats. It's appropriate change so that staff aren't either, that they're multi-skilled. That was one query there. The other thing I was just wondering with staffing, who the new community development officer is, and also that's on page 28 and page 84, there's a contractor engaged to do the state environment report. I'm just wondering how many contractors do we actually have, and also is the person who's been overseeing some of that drought flood work down on the east, is that a contracted person or?
Okay, through you, Mr Deputy Mayor. The training I'll take on notice. I think the reason that the crane training was actually mentioned in there is because it's a new piece of plant. There's actually ongoing training for all the other stuff we've got, including updating of the tickets because they run out and things like that. Mobile scaffolding, rigging, dogging, and all the tickets that have got to be updated every 3 years now, including the white card and blue card and so on. Rebecca Kelly's the CDO. She's been on here for probably 6 months now, or maybe a bit longer. Council puts on contractors as required and puts off contractors as required. I spoke to the Human Resource Manager this morning, and as per my report in February, we've got exactly 111 FTEs, and that includes a shared position between Edna and Igor. Edna being a management accountant, Igor being a statutory accountant. So the number of positions hasn't gone up. Occasionally through the year, and Frank Boyce is a classic example of this. Council will receive money, or council will lose a staff member, and as you know, Belinda Savins has resigned. And in the process of between the permanent replacement being found and that person going, quite often we backfill with contractors, sometimes through LOGO, which is the local government procurement pre-approved contractor for that. Other times, if we think we can get it cheaper locally, we advertise for an EOI locally. Frank was put on and his wage has been paid for through the Woodenbong road upgrade project. Purely out of the $24 million that council received, $12 million from the state, $12 million from the federal. If, for example, council were to receive, I think it was about $6.2 million in one of the bridge funding applications, council's operations has been designed and we're running at a day-to-day basis. If we need other engineers or other people to do that work, that'll be by contract as well. We design the workforce for flatlining, meaning day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year. When we get bumps and extra money come in, or we get absenteeism for any reason, we then short-term backfill through contract. So the answer isn't, the question may be better asked is, do the contractors match the operational and capital works needs at the time? And the answer to that is yes. On behalf of Andre, Andre's a bit of a hard taskmaster with contracts and contractors. He's been here about 14 months and he's sacked 3. So if they don't cut the mustard, they don't work here. Most contractors are put on to do a job, and if they can't do it, they go. Sometimes they're gone faster than I noticed when Andre comes in and said, "Oh, by the way, that person's now gone." Righto, good show. Other times they finish most of the time, I should say, 95% of the time, they finish their remit and then they go on to other pastures. Kim Appleby is an example of that. Frank Boyce is an example of that. David Ward is filling in at the moment in between asset managers. He's an example of that. Frank Boyce has been employed through the RMS funding. He's an example of that. And Edna Mendez and Igor are both contractors, and they're in lieu of putting a full-time person on for the management account and statutory accountants role. And the reason for that is management accountants love doing that side of accountancy, and statutory people love that, and they're completely different fields. When we spoke to Igor many months ago about doing the job, he wasn't interested because he only likes statutory accounting. Edna only likes management accounting. And so the job's been split. They're both contractors. They've both got no intention of applying for the job, and they're delivering what we want. Yeah, we can do the same thing.
Sorry, just in terms of terminology too, when we talk about contractors, the State of the Environment Report isn't a contract staff member, it's a contract elect to provide the report and the update. So we did a contract when we did the last community strategic plan to develop at the same time the State of the Environment Report, and as part of that agreement there is the annual updates which then go in as part of your annual report. So that's not actually a staff member, that's somebody coming in to update the report that they've provided to council under contract.
Just said contractor.
Yeah. So, and that's what I'm saying, in terms of the terminology, we sometimes get those a little confused, if that makes sense. So that's actually a process that we've factored in, I guess, as a cost to have the State of the Environment, nor would we actually have the skills in-house to develop that or do those updates in those particular times.
Any other questions? Councillor McNish.
Thanks, Mr. I never did. Will this be discussed in confidential?
Yes.
Good, okay. Onto the staff matrix on page 4, I think it is. There we've got Parks and Gardens, Horticultural and Land Coordinator as a full position. Has anyone anything happened there with that position?
I'll get Kylie to speak on it. Basically, the person we offered and accepted the job only lasted 8 days and resigned on, actually might have only been 7 days. started on the Tuesday, resigned the following Tuesday. And we're now in negotiation with someone else that was on the merit list, and I don't know whether that negotiations are up to Mr. Smith might be able to help me.
So we're just actually waiting to re-interview that person. So they are actually on the merit list, so we could actually, move forward and put them in that particular position. But as I said, at this stage, I think it's something like possibly next week or the week after, we'll have a face-to-face and go through some of the requirements.
I hope so, because now's the time we actually need a qualified horticulturalist. I mentioned also at one stage, Mr. General Manager, that putting names to these positions, and also I'd like a list of contractors, consultants.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, we actually took the names off quite deliberately, because what was happening, members of the public were seeing who was doing what and attempting to ring them directly instead of going through the switch and having it logged through our record system. And if it's not logged through our record system, and for example, someone sees that so-and-so's the grader operator there, or so-and-so's the open space person there, they'll approach them directly, and then council's got no track of if it's a public liability or for management of costs or even complaints. So for the first few months that this was publicised, the names were actually on, and we went to a great deal of trouble to take the names off for that reason, to encourage people to go through the switch or to go through the record section. I'm also, with the exception of the senior staff, I'm also not certain under the NARS register whether it's actually completely legal to have the names on there either. And I'll ask Kyle to speak about that.
Just that there are privacy considerations about putting the names of particular staff in a public document against the roles that they occupy.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I can't see the point of it, but I appreciate it. But I think maybe a copy for councillors only. I think it would be nice for us to know, to see a person say, well, that's what they do, rather than walking in and see a different face walking around saying, who are they, what do they do? That's probably just a personal thing. Next we're going back up to page 79, that's sale yards. As you all know, we've got very, very grave concerns about our sale yards here and the amount of money being expended on them for the possible return. The last three cattle sales, I think one was 118 head, one was 120, 124, somewhere around that figure, which is negligible. And you can't blame the drought for that. There's obviously cattle who guys with extra feed and they're fattening them up. The prices are fairly good, but the numbers are appalling. And it comes back to that truck wash. That if that's the numbers we're getting, there's a very small amount of trucks bringing them in, and a small amount of trucks that need washing. I couldn't imagine if there's 120 head of a sale, there's going to be too many B-doubles bringing those stock in. Now I can just, my biggest concern is that the truck wash will be the biggest white elephant of all time. And the move of the sale yards is clearly towards regional yards. It's obvious, everyone's talking about it. And we talk about it also that the private weighing is decreasing. I just can't remember off the top of my head what the private weighing is, something like $12 a head or something like that. Now, when you send cattle away on Auctions Plus, the truck weighs out of Darryl McCarthy's, then weigh empty, then goes back and weighs full. I think it's $24 for a certificate, which works out to about 40 or 50 cents a head to weigh. Now, we just can't compete with that sort of thing. So I think we'll have a close look at the sale yards. I know they're a wonderful asset for the town if they're used, but more and more people are not using them. And we're spending all this money on new rails, truck wash, new shed for the ages so they get their head wet and that sort of stuff. And I just can't see it being sustainable. I've no emotion there, it's just a concern I have. I don't know if other councillors sort of feel the same way about that.
Through Mr. Deputy Mayor. Councillor, would you like us to go back through as much information as we've got and do some sort of graph showing the numbers and include that in the report?
I don't think you need, Mr. General Manager. I think it's all very self-explanatory. to make too much, but it's just a concern. I think it's something we've got to look at in the future. Now we've got, we've got a $500,000 grant. We've still got to borrow a similar amount of money to get this truck wash done, and it may well be wonderful asset for the community, and I'll let Humble Pie and say I was wrong, but I just can't see it that way.
Councillor Petrie.
Thank you. An update on the truck wash was one of my things. I mean, some months ago, I had asked to look at repositioning it because of the escalating cost, and I thought there was potential for a cheaper site with less trouble, but I was told that that would affect our grant if it was held up and delayed, and since then it's actually been delayed months and months and months and months beyond what I had asked for. So can we receive an update on the truck wash at some stage in the near future, please? And with the dam wall, which has obviously gone very well, I was just wondering if we might be able to check it upon completion, might do another site visit. The other issues I had with regard to the horticulture officer, and as I previously suggested to Terry 12 months ago, we actually have in the area a lady, and I apologise, Peter, because it's Caroline Robinson, who's got the most wonderful garden design stuff, and I don't even know whether she would be available, but I just thought in the short term, I think we ought to pay someone such as Caroline to do what we needed doing on a contract for several months, and who's featured in magazines, etc., of garden design, etc., etc. Anyone who's been to any gardens, Caroline has designed and had built just blown away by them, and we've got it here on our doorstep, and sorry, people I'll have to ask Caroline whether she would even be available, but that is an option that we have. If we could explore that. I'm wondering, the Tenterfield video that's mentioned on page 31, I haven't actually seen the video. I've seen the photos of Tenterfield on the TV, but no TV.
The video's on our website.
Yeah, not everyone's going to go and look at the website. I mean, if you see the Kyogle video on the TV, are we going to actually put the Tenterfield video on the TV ad, or is that not in our budget?
I think it has been.
I think Councillor Petrie, the problem you have is that the broadcaster separates the vision that's seen in different areas. So if we're targeting Tenterfield, they don't show it in Tenterfield, they show it on the coastal further down, and we see other areas in our area. So it's been on.
Yeah, but is it on TV?
It's been on, and there's been feedback.
And my final thing is the road to the Rocky. Now, for the first time in over 70 years, the road to the Lower Rocky was closed last week. It's as a result of works with the from the flood money from 2015. Now, parts of the road that were done are really, really good, with a very good operator there under the contractor. But there's two sections, one which has resulted in a closure, and the other one that would have resulted in a closure if anyone had really looked at it, which is along Wangabum Platte. Two-wheel drive vehicle wouldn't have been able to use it, and the four-wheel drive was actually going along the grass on the side of the road to actually get along the flat. And when the landowner there spoke to a council person who's in charge of it, who's either new or a project manager or what, he said, oh no, it's due to the weather. And landowner said, well, don't you think it's rained before? In fact, there's been so much rain down there previously that the river actually came onto Wagga Flat. Now, the river only went up to a metre this time, not 10 metres. And it is not just due to the weather, it's the fact that side material has been graded back onto the flats in both sections, resulting in there's a landowner on the Lower Rocky there, in order to feed cattle on his two properties. One trip he had to do through Drake to get to one property, he had to come back to town and then go down through Billabimba to do the other property because of the 6 kilometre closure. And which of course is a huge time and monetary impost, and the people in the middle could come up from Sydney and could not even visit their property. Now, the concern is obviously we're getting gravel where we can, particularly in the cuttings, which is great, and there's been a lot of really good work done, but the concern is why instructions are given to do stuff that is not suitable and resulting in the closure of a road that hasn't been closed in over 70 years and the closure of another, or the unusable state of another section of road that hasn't been that way since council gravelled it about 25, 30 years ago, with minimal weather considering the current state. So that is a question. And the other thing was, there's two corners there on the Upper Rocky that were narrow, they're now even more narrow. And when asked about that, this same person said, oh, we ran out of money. And that's really, and I said, well, why don't you just leave it alone? Because it's now even worse than it was before you started. So there's been a lot of really good roadworks, but the issue seems to be in this other section. And certainly a section that was done from Drake down to Hawkers has been done really, really well. And then suddenly there's some person overseeing it who wasn't there previously, and now things have gone to front. Thank you.
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, I've got a meeting with the Works Manager about this issue, and I'm also going, I'll be in the motor vehicle with James for 3 hours to and from Urbanville next Tuesday morning, Urbanville. So I have plenty of opportunity to speak to him about it. I haven't been out and viewed it yet, and I don't think I'll get time to do it this week. And the reason I'm saying myself and Andre is that Andre's got a medical condition he's attending to this week and won't be back till next week. So yeah, I've spoken to James about it once, but I'll get to the bottom of it and see what I can do.
Can I just ask, why is there a person overseeing who we've never had one before with the last round in 2000, when they did it before, just the council staff oversaw it, like, like James or Gary Herney or something. I'm just wondering why, and is that why we're running out of money on that project? Is that because we're actually employing additional people to oversee the grant money that we never had before, and therefore we're losing money that could have actually gone into the road? These are the sort of questions people ask.
Yeah, look, I'll have to check that, Councillor Petrie. I suspect it's to do with the fact that the NDRRA only allows us to use contractors to do the work. And that doesn't change until the 1st of November, but I'll have to check that and get back to you.
I think we've very well covered questions on the operational report. The recommendations there, all in favour? Against? Carried. Item GOV 76/18, disclosure of interest returns for 2017-2018. The recommendation that the council note the total of the disclosure of interest returns for the period 2017-2018 and lodged by 30th September 2018. Move and second to deal with it, please. Ryan Murray, Gary Berry.
Unless there's any questions, the council keeps copies of these, and under the act we have to do that. We've had 100% compliance, although there was a few that were late this year, but we're still compliant.
Any questions? Recommendations there, all in favour? Against? Carried. Item GOV 77/18, the Christmas New Year close down for this year and early next year. The recommendations there that the indoor staff close on the Friday the 21st, reopen 2/1/19. Outdoor staff close 20 December, reopen Monday 7/19. Move and seconded, please. Bob Rogan, Gary Berry. Any questions?
We'll be given the usual list of emergency contacts, won't we, and public?
Answer you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, yes.
Any other questions? All in favour? Against? Carried. Item GOV 78/18, request for financial assistance for legal costs associated with the appeal of the Land and Environment Court rating categorisation decisions, City of Sydney Council, North Sydney Council and Bayside City Council. The officer's recommendation is that council consider the application for financial assistance and do not make a payment to the value of $1,716.75 as per the invoice for the local government New South Wales in accordance with the legal assistance policy. Move and seconded to deal with it, please. Brian Murray and Councillor McNish. Anybody want to talk to them? Kylie?
Look, I think I'll leave the report there. Obviously, we've got a request that's come through from local government in South Wales. We've also actually included within that report a copy of their legal assistance policy and guidelines, and happy for council to make a determination as to whether or not they wish to provide support.
Councillor McNish.
Yeah, over the years, we've had several of these requests. There's always been a fairly good reason why we do it. The main one, of course, is where we need help from other councils, it will be forthcoming, and Mike Clifton, I say he's on council, we've not knocked one of these back. So I'll support this one.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Reagan.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I've just got a question for either Terry or Kylie. The Tenterfield Shire Council will use the determination by the court to apply rates and charges. So the question is, what determination, the one that's currently being made, or the one that might be made after the appeals? Thanks.
The answer to that question, councillor, is we keep a close eye on all of those decisions. We do our best at all times to keep up to date and implement or monitor our processes in accordance with what's coming out of once tested by the court. So we'll start off with the first one, and then we shall progress if the outcome is different.
Councillor Murray, did you
Through you, Mr Deputy. Yeah, I just concur with Councillor McNish on that note, that it's very handy sometimes. You look at what's ahead, and it's always nice to be able to tune into the other.
Thank you. Councillor Petrie.
Have they divvied up the cost equally between all councils, or have they adjusted it for smaller councils compared to regional?
Who wants to answer that one?
My understanding is that, and it's not in there, that there is actually some guidelines about the amount of assistance based on, same as the membership guidelines. So different rates for different councils.
Just as background to the case, so was it business, obviously it's business land that council were wanting to raise as business, and that some residential building was being built on it. I just don't quite understand how the case came about with either Terry or
Honestly, I think I'd like to actually take them on notice. I'm happy to give you the documents to go through and have a look, because as I said, it is reasonably complex, and I don't think there'll be a course of level detail about it.
Other questions? With the recommendation, those in favour? Against? Carried. Sorry, yes, we have to determine whether we were making or not making, and I believe the intent was to make. Thank you. Will we go? Will we go? Still got me training well done. Welcome, Paul. The next matter, I believe, is GOV 79/18, the financing accounts for the period ending 30th of September. Recommendations there that we receive and note the financing accounts report for the period 30th September 2018. Move and seconded to deal with it. Tom Peters, Gary Berry. Who's down there? Paul, you're in the chair.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Yes, as the report states, the cash balance as at the 30th of September 2018 was $4,423,584.77, and the trust fund balance remains unchanged at $321,533.93. The attachment of the investments there totaling $1,004,284.39. You will note that there's an investment that is determines today, so we'll be reinvesting as appropriate to quotations and so on today for that. And
Any questions of Paul? All happy? I'll put the recommendation then. All in favour? Against? Carried. Next item on the agenda is GOV 80/18, capital expenditure report as at 30th of September 2018. The recommendation is that council receive and note the capital expenditure report for the period ending 30th September 2018. Mover and seconder, please. Gary Berry, Bronwyn Petrie. Paul.
thanks again, Mr Deputy Mayor. Happy to take any questions on the please.
Any questions of Paul in relation to the report? Councillor Beck.
Yeah, just one, not so much on the figures, sorry, Paul, but in our operations report, there was a comment about people wanting bitumen and sealing near their homes. Was that the dust suppression? If so, where would that fit under transport network?
Through you, Mr. Deputy, I have to take that on notice and provide the exact account that we can't.
Councillor McNish.
If it may help, Mr Deputy Mayor, some years ago, the decision was made not to do any more dust abatements.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? Put the recommendation, all in favour? Against? Carried. Next one on the agenda is GOV 81/18, report on the loan balances. The recommendation states that the loan balance on the 30th September was 7.5 million, round figures, 7.6903, 27.31 at June 2018. Mover and seconder, please. Bob Rogan, Brian Murray. Paul.
Thank you. Through you again, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I don't really have anything further to add on this report. I think probably the next report will probably cover some things which we might want to.
Any questions of Paul? Councillor Baker.
No, but I just wanted to say thank you for putting this in the format too.
That was a thank you. No other questions? I'll put the recommendation. All in favour? Against? Carried. Next on the agenda is GOV 82/18, Treasury Corporation borrowings, approval for council to approach relevant parties with a view to gaining access to this source of loan fund subject to meeting T-Corp guidelines. As its recommendation pretty much the same. Mover and seconder, Gary Veery, Paul Rogan. Paul.
Thank you. Through you again, Mr. Deputy Mayor. The report's fairly self-explanatory. We've had some discussions over a number of months on the issue of the T-Corp loans and our ability to, in reality at the moment, to borrow money from that source. The recommendation is that we approach the Minister to request permission for council to give access to be able to borrow from that source. And the rationale for that is clearly listed in the report there. It's a catch-22 situation we're in at the moment. It's quite unacceptable. On the one hand, councils have declared fit for the future and can afford borrowings to benefit, but lowers their borrowing costs, while those that weren't declared fit are penalised for making them pay more for the borrowings. And from the example there in terms of what the T-Corp rate was at the time of writing the report compared to other financial institutions' rates, it's clear that there's a cost to council, which is a cost to ratepayers of borrowing at the moment at the higher rate. So it's, to me, it's a no-brainer that we should do this.
Any questions? Brian Murray, followed by Bob Rogan.
Through Mr. Deputy, can I ask a question about fit for the future? Is it now, do we speak about it in terms of being deceased or?
Through you again, Mr. Deputy Mayor, yes, it's not really part of the parliaments anymore. They're using, so yes, I believe it is deceased.
Thank you.
Councillor Rogan.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor Paul. If, given that there is a catch-22 situation, as you explained, and because we may not be, there's no means they have to assess whether we're eligible or not, what other avenues would you be referring to? What, writing letters to a minister or something? Just a question.
Through you again, Mr. Deputy Mayor, yes, other avenues could be of a political nature.
Councillor Petrie.
Yeah, it's not just a no-brainer as to the fact that it makes it easier for a council, whether they're fit for the future or not, to access a cheaper loan. But the fact is that we have proved
we are being fiscally responsible, and therefore if there was a reassessment, I'm sure we would pass. So I'm just wondering on that note, if we could get any support from the Office of Local Government as well in allowing Terry Peter to approach through a local member and our minister to get this, a way of getting this adjusted.
So through Mr Deputy Mayor, you're quite right, the process has ended. We've already had discussions with people whereby they've indicated that we would meet their borrowing requirements. And one of the challenges for us is that it would appear that there hasn't been any push at this point in time from the Office of Local Government to seek the Minister to put her on her list. So we actually have to be on the ministerial list to be able to borrow, and hence why we're seeking the direct representation to the Minister at this point in time, because all of our approaches from an officer level of council haven't really led us to any definitive conclusion or process on how we might be able to actually get on that list other than through a political type process. It's also no accident the timing of this report, of course, because we're just this close to completing our financial statements for this year as well.
Councillor Peters, get your wrap up, please, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a quick question. Can I find out what the difference is between a commercial loan interest rate and a T-Corp interest rate? How much is the variation?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, it's in the report. When at the time of writing this report, the T-Corp rate was on the loan I was looking at the time was 4.1% compared to I had a quote from another institution of 5.07%.
Any supplementary on that one, Councillor? Happy? No further questions? I'll put the recommendation. All in favour? Against? Carried. Last recommendation on the ordinary agenda, RES 9/18, Council Resolution Register of October 2018, the resolution that we note the status of the resolution registered to October 2018. Moving second, please. Gary Berry, Bronwyn Petrie. Thanks, Paul. Who wants to see it? Any questions? Councillor Petrie?
Just in relation to what you call DAs, I guess.
Page number?
Take that. It was just a general question about DAs. We are getting an increased level of DA activity, correct?
Correct. You can see that in the monthly operational plan.
And so with our ability to resolve different motions and things like that, and our staffing, is there a hold up in DAs? I mean, it's really interesting that at last meeting were told that there's no interest in the Shire in developing and doing subdivisions, etc., 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 and yet we seem to have at the moment an influx of DAs. But I'm also hearing that there's a bit of a time lag in getting them approved. I'm just wondering how we're going with that combined with our resolutions from council.
So in terms of that one, we do have more, which has placed an increased stress on staff, and this is a short term. We've talked about smoothing out some of those higher workloads, I guess. So yes, that is causing a additional workload on those staff at this point in time, which may have a flow-on effect of being able to tackle some of the more strategic items on the list. Having said that, in terms of the applications themselves, we're well within our 40 days for those that are subject to the 40 days. At this particular point in time, you'll notice too that there are various times when the clock actually stops. So when we're waiting for additional information, so staff can't, hurry along the DA if the information isn't provided. So we're within those, and then of course too, we're still managing some of those confined developments, and it is a little bit of a moving feast at this point in time. Has things changed, like we talked about this morning, some of the requirements, because we've got the new farm stepping stone coming in, so things like that will suddenly become compliant developments which weren't previously compliant, and even though they're still compliant, they're usually lodged with that.
Any other questions? Councillor Reagan?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Page 15 and 16. The motion regarding encouraging the mountain bikes. I notice it's still being processed as far as it's where we're at. And on the comment section on page 16, it talks about further discussions have been held with interest groups and no further action. Then pre-DA discussions are underway with local development. I just wanted to get an insight into what that's about. Go back a few minutes if we haven't heard anything.
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, yes, we can. I'll speak to the Manager of Economic Development Committee engagement about that, and I might even be able to get a short précis at the next council workshop to speak about that, because I know the mountain bikes is high on everybody's agenda, and it's an opportunity for the Shire.
Sorry, just by way of update, we were talking about pre-DA discussions. We have had a DA lodged from an individual that's looking to pursue that, and so we're just in the process of undertaking discussions, I guess, for that individual to be able to do that. One of the challenges that we're sort of working through right now, and the implications are in and around biodiversity, so where the track's actually placed in works that might need to happen, so that's actually in train, and the planning team are working with them to try and come up with a suitable outcome in terms of that, not so much in terms of council actually promoting that, so that's a private provider who's put in an application.
Councillor Petrie.
Yes, well, supplementary to that question of Councillor Rogers, with the, what's the requirement for a mountain bike track to have a DA, other than in relation to garbage, etc., because under the Biodiversity Act, you can have farm roads up to 30 metres wide as an allowable with no environmental assessment. So why would we be, and particularly when you look at mountain bikes, have tracks basically not much wider than our track anyway, why on earth are we requiring biodiversity assessment when under the Biodiversity Act 2016 you can have, under the allowable section, Schedule 5A, you can have up to 30 metres wide tracks and roads in this, and fence lines in the Shire.
At this point in time, we're not actually requiring an assessment. We're trying to ensure that the development actually doesn't trigger it because of the particular area of where they want to put it. So it's only a small section of the track. So that's what we're working with the proponent to try and make sure that we don't trigger those provisions.
Some more information, please. So what other DAs required if we're going to encourage people to do mountain bike tracks in the Shire, and obviously from my meeting we had up north, there was another person who's involved in the very same thing. When does it trigger a DA, and when does it not trigger a DA putting in a mountain bike track?
My understanding is it depends on where the location is and what the categorisation of that land, so whether or not it's behind bioheritage conservation. But I'm happy to take that one on notice and get some more information, because that's where we're at this point in time, is concerns around the high sensitivity of this much of a portion of the proposed development. Bearing in mind they will be considered as whole developments as well, so we talked about tourism, etc. So a lot of the developments we get won't just be the track, it'll be track amenities and various other things as well to support that use of the track.
Councillor Darren, are you looking to?
No, nothing.
No further questions? I'll put the resolution. All in favour? Against? Carried. That completes the ordinary meeting agenda. And I'm a mover and seconder to move into confidential, please. Gary Bennett, Tom Peters. Okay, we're back into public councillors, and the items that were dealt with during the confidential section were items COM 20/18, leasing of council-owned properties. It was resolved that Council 1 received to delegate authority to the CE to enter into 3-year leases for the following properties in line with expected income projections obtained in the report for the following. Lot 1, DP 390204 and 134 Manor Street, Tenterfield. And 2, resolved to delegate authority to the Chief Executive to enter into a 2-year lease for the following property in line with expected income projections contained in the report for the following. 8933 New England Highway, Tenterfield. A, reasonable access to be provided to council staff for council purposes for the agricultural properties. B, signage income remains the property of Pennyfield Shire Council, access and advertising. And 3, authorises the leases to be signed under the seal of council by the Mayor and the Chief Executive. Carried. Second item was item ECO 2418, the detailed design and documentation of the upgrade to Mackenzie Road at Carrilla Creek and Big Hill. The council's recommendation was that the council accept the tender of Maloney Solutions as trustee for Maloney and Sons Trust, trading as Maloney and Sons Engineering, for the design and construction tender documentation of the upgrade to Carrilla Creek and Big Hill sections of Mount Lindsay Road in the amount of $239,363.52, including GST. Next item was ECO 25/18 for light vehicle supply agreement. The officer's recommendation was that council accept the offer of Northern Rivers Motors Proprietary Limited entering into the final 2-year contract of a 2-by-2-year option with the view of allowing adequate time to engage an external independent party to conduct a detailed light vehicle cost review. Carried. The item was ECO 2618 for professional services tender 10/17/18. The officer's recommendation was that council accept all submitted tenders as a panel of preferred suppliers for professional services, and carried. All business completed, meeting closed at 1:29 p.m. Thank you very much for making it easy for an Illinois.